The Vikings are, on the whole, an incredibly clean 4-0, and yet a lot of you have concerns. Let's see where the other shoe is going to drop. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Vikings podcast your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. My hashtag every day is my question askers, as this is a Mailbag Tuesday, Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. So thank you so much for hanging out. You can find the show anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings wherever you listen to your favorite shows. You can also catch this show. You can watch this show on YouTube. Just search out Locked On Vikings. You can also catch this show on Amazon Fire and Roku with the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. It is Twitter Tuesday. That means I am answering your questions. You can submit questions to me anytime via the Google form in the show notes. It's linked in every episode, as well as by email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can also send me a DM on Twitter, but I will be honest, sometimes I forget to look at those. And you can either respond to the prompt that I put out on Monday or go to whatever the other channels are. So, first question that I am going to answer today comes from Camilla from Brazil, who asks a question that about 300 other people asked. Oh my God. In the second half, did the Flores defense get solved, or were they just playing an ultra-conservative prevent defense? This is the burning question of the Viking. Oh, literally like half the mailbag was some version of this question. Oh, did LaFleur expose them? You know, are they solved this time and all that? And I think that's a perfectly valid thing to wonder. Was this a solving in the way the Bengals game was last year, where it's like, oh, they found the secret sauce, everyone's going to copy this? And the question is, can another team come in and control the same things that the Packers could control and win in the same way, right? And there are two reasons that I think that's going to be really hard. They give me pause before I start saying like, ooh, solved. One, the situation was warped for the entire second half. I mean, you had the Packers going for 4th and 8 in the third quarter. Like, this was weird. And that caused a lot of the play calling to be very weird. More passing attempts than you would usually see in like a neutral situation where the game is like really close. You'd see a little bit more running than you would see. And that would change the way that both teams approach things. It just would be a different game. But also, there's the Jordan Love of it all. And here's what I think really happened in that second half defensively. No, it absolutely was not a conservative prevent defense. People say prevent defense, they just mean bad defense. If you're calling this prevent defense, I'm sorry, I love you. You have no idea what you're talking about. This was not prevent at all. Maybe the depths dropped a little deeper, but that's not prevent. Prevent is a different thing, and there's been no prevent defense. What happened with the Vikings was, for one, I think just brains fell out a little bit. You had some guys kind of dropping to sides that you weren't supposed to. Relating to eyes maybe a little too hard, which is hard to get mad at them for, but sometimes they just were missing landmarks. And on top of that, it took the Packers forever to find those holes. There's always going to be holes in the zone when you send a blitz. And Flores kept blitzing. He did not stop blitzing. And until it was like the literal last drive where the fact that it took a minute was enough to essentially ensure that you win the game. But the other thing was that Jordan Love just escaped a lot of pressure. In fact, it leads me to the next question, which comes from Smart Guy Rye, who says, Vikings brought a lot of pressure, but little got home. Why is that? And I think, Smart Guy Rye, you might be missing that they got 20 pressures. 20 pressure dropbacks of like 52 dropbacks. Like, yeah, that's a great clip. That's a clip we can be very happy about in terms of pressure on Jordan Love. Why did none of it, quote unquote, get home? Like, why didn't it turn into sacks? Well, Jonathan Bernard missed one. You had a couple other kind of arms reaching out, not quite. Jordan Love escaped. And what I think is frustrating is that he escaped to the same side every single. He always just escaped he just rolled right and heaved one up every single time. Roll right and heave one up. Like, contain that dude. have whoever is on his right contain. It feels like a very fixable problem in the long run if you hit another quarterback like that, or next time you play against Jordan Love, although presumably he'll be healthier by week 17. So you're probably going to see a different version of him. But Jordan Love got pressured a lot, escaped off of it a lot, rolled out, and then heaved up a bunch of things that punished what I'm going to call like inaccurate dropbacks. Byron Murphy was the victim of one of these, or the culprit, I guess, of one of these, where he was supposed to drop into a deep third, and he ended up like inside the numbers, and it's just that's just too shallow. And what he's doing is trying to relate to a post, and he's getting a little bit cheaty with it, and he just gets caught cheating. So I think it's like guys get caught cheating a little bit, but when you have 4 or 5 seconds, you're gonna find that. And like 100 of Jordan Love's yards come over 4 seconds. That's ridiculous. That's so much. Over 4 seconds is forever for an NFL player. If you sit in the pocket for 4 seconds, we will all say, "Oh my God, he could read a book back there." So there were a few things that went wrong, but I think calling it like prevent, calling it schematically solved, I don't think is accurate at all. I think the Vikings defensive backs made mistakes. There were also miscommunications and just kind of breaking on the wrong thing, taking chances and getting punished. The D-backs made mistakes, and that's why they all went in the locker room after and told the media, "Hey, we got to clean up this, and that." And Jordan Love made good plays. If your quarterback can run around for 4 seconds and heave another one up and the Vikings keep making mistakes, then yeah, I guess Flores is solved. But I don't think that that's the future we're looking down the barrel of. Screams at his TV Dane says, has the success in stopping the run game and success of the linebacker core with Ivan Pace out been a result of Brian Flores' new weapons and the flexibility he gets from them, or Grugier Hill stepping up? Kamu has just played like a veteran. I think the plays that you remember him for, I mean, the interception he got last week against the Texans was just wrong place, right time. He did not drop properly, I don't think. The way that I understand the Flores drops are supposed to be, he dropped to a hash when he was supposed to drop over the ball. But then that's where the ball ended up off of the tip, because I think it was a drop or something. And then it just landed right in his lap, right? This one was actually just a pretty good veteran play and a very calm play. And it's actually interesting. So Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers, he was asking about that one. And so we were talking about like what happened there, and it was Tampa 2. Grugier Hill opens to the trip side. He opens to speed. So what I mean by that, when you do your drop back, you open your hips up, right? You turn your hips so you can drop faster. And which way you do that is a decision. You do it to whichever one has the scarier threat. And the 3 receiver side is going to be the scarier threat. So you open up that way. And it's dagger. So we've got to clear out running. And what I thought was, that middle runner, which is what Kamu is supposed to run with that. But it turns out a guy that used to play for Brian Flores by the name of Trey Watson, I think he's a UFL guy now, chimed in on Twitter and corrected me, which was really cool, and said, actually, it's if there's one vertical threat, and that's the only vertical threat on the whole concept, well, you got 2 deep safeties, they can handle it. You stay home, and now you don't lose to dagger. And that's exactly what he did. On another play, I was like, okay, so then explain this one where it's the same deal, same coverage, dagger, big play. And it was earlier on that, I think that same drive, same quarter for sure, where Cashman ran with it. And he said, yeah, I think he just kind of felt a guy on top of him and turned around and ran with it, which is kind of a no-no. So that's a coverage error. So interesting. I learned a thing about how Flores defenses do Tampa 2. Pretty cool stuff. But so calm veteran play, right? See that vertical go, feel a guy on top of you, don't panic, stay where you're supposed to be, get the pick. But I will say, which this addresses the next question, which comes from Caleb, has Kamu played into a starting role when Pace gets back, or has he just got interceptions and nothing else? There's enough mistakes on the tape, and I think Pace did enough really cool stuff in those first couple of games where I don't think you're considering this at all. I think Pace still definitely has that job. Maybe you work him in, you rotate, you keep legs fresh or something like that, but I think it's still Pace and Cashman pretty comfortably. Spencer Harvey says, how do you feel about the constant need for challenges this Sunday? If they hadn't already burned all of them, do you think KOC challenges the 4th and 1 at the end of the game? So as of last year, this is a relatively new rule change. All 4th and 1 failures count as turnovers for the purposes of being automatically reviewed. So that was reviewed and upheld. So you take it up with New York. But yeah, needing 3 challenges kind of sucks. I thought all of those were like pretty tough calls. So I'm not too mad at the ref about it. Except for the Jefferson one, the last one. That one you probably should have been able to see. He got his toes down, and you're standing right there on the sideline. Like, your job is to see that as it goes really fast. So needing that one kind of sucks. But the other ones that were like these like trappy balls, did they or didn't they catch it kind of stuff, these low worm burners from Jordan Love, like those are so hard to see. So I'm not too mad about it. And I think that the rule itself, like maybe you could get infinite challenges if you like keep getting them right or whatever. But I think it's pretty rare for there to be a moment where you like have a fourth thing you wish you could have challenged and you don't get it. Like, that doesn't come up a lot, so I'm not too worried about it. I have a ton more questions here on Twitter Tuesday on this mailbag episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Might be a little bit too late to get in on those Vikings playoff odds. They are now a little too likely to do that, but what if you just took those Sam Darnold MVP odds? That's right, Sam Darnold MVP odds, plus 1,100 on FanDuel right now. 5th in the league, above Purdy, Goff, Burrow, Prescott. Crazy stuff, crazy world we are living in. You can go gamble on that or whatever it is on FanDuel. And right now you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So whether it's a big futures bet like that or something like it's halftime of a game and I feel a collapse coming on, maybe I'll go take the 17-point spread that this has come into because the first half was such a blowout. You can gamble on all of that at FanDuel. And if you place your first $5 bet, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Just go sign up at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, I would love it if you went and checked out my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, where I can do full-on film breakdowns in a little bit more of an elongated setting without having to worry about all the other stuff that I have to worry about when I'm doing a podcast. It's a lot more chill, and I think it allows me to be a little bit more direct with some of the stuff I get to say. So go check that out. You can watch a lot of what is on there for free. And when stuff does go up there, it is potentially members only, but probably only for the week. So go check it out, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Next up on this mailbag episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, Will Melvin says, with so many teams like the 49ers, Texans, and Packers turning to a Shanahan-style offense, is it easier for Flores to game plan on a weekly basis, or are they different enough for it not to matter? I think this is a really good point. There's a lot of shared DNA. I think in terms of how you prepare for them week to week, there are enough differences that I'll say provide opportunities for things to attack, where you're going to go, okay, these guys go from this personnel more. We want to attack it with that way. We want to attack these guys with speed a little more, and et cetera. And they present different challenges. One week you're preparing for Deebo Samuel. The next you're preparing for Stephon Diggs. The next you're preparing for Josh Jacobs. So there's definitely still differences, but yeah, you can absolutely overlap because a lot of these concepts are, okay, when, the 49ers roll out, it looks a lot like when the Packers roll out. They maybe have slightly different depths and we have to adjust, but the coverage that we use for a rollout flood concept is going to remain the same, and you can sort of reuse some of that stuff. Kirk Cousins actually talked about a lot of that from the offensive perspective, about how, like, over the course of the season, part of the game within the game is who installed concepts that worked really well in week 3 that they can bring back for week 15 when they need them in the middle of a game and go, hey, this thing, we practiced this a couple months ago. You all remember it, right? Let's just run it. And you kind of have access to that even if you didn't walk it through over the week. Interesting game within the game. Mischief Enjoyer says, what's the process for getting Hawk up to speed for his return? And what do you think that first game looks like for him in terms of snap count and putting him in position to succeed? So there's been some reporting on this. Adam Schefter has reported, I think, that they're looking at the Rams game, which I believe is week 8. I could also see week 7. I've heard some optimism for that. That the London game, probably not. And then you go into the bye, and then it's either that Lions game or the Rams game after on the short week. One of those two. So somewhere around there is what it is. In terms of what the process actually looks like, what he's doing right now is rebuilding strength and stamina. He's spent a long time just healing the knee and then rebuilding strength in that lower leg because you basically had to stay off it. You lost all your muscle definition, right? You lost all your strength. So you have to rebuild that. And then once you feel like you've rebuilt and you're walking normally and you're running normally and everything's there, now you got to get back into football shape. That's, I think, the last part. So he's ramping that up right now. But hopefully you kind of get them by like middle October, which I think if you told us middle October when we learned that it was an MCL in addition to an ACL, like last January, if you'd said middle October, it'd be like, oh, bummer. But I guess that's okay, especially if you tell us we'd be 4-0 to start that season. Ben Worse, I get it, asks, given that the Vikings are currently 4-0 and Sam Darnold is performing exceptionally well, do you think that even if JJ McCarthy hadn't been injured, the team might have delayed his midseason takeover to continue capitalizing on Darnold's strong performance? Oh my God, absolutely. And that was the plan. They told us that was the plan too. I think a lot of people didn't believe it because it's so default for us to assume, oh, the first round quarterback, he's going to go right in. But like, that doesn't happen all the time. Drake May still hasn't played. I mean, Penix is probably going to sit 2 years, right? So the Vikings were going to sit him, I think, until Sam Darnold made it until either McCarthy is ready and we feel like he's a better quarterback than Darnold, or Darnold has played so bad that we just have to turn to the kid to try to get a spark on this dying season. We definitely haven't hit that point yet, either way. So yeah, it was going to be Darnold until it wasn't, and whether McCarthy was healthy or not, like he would have been probably an afterthought at this point, and they would have gone, "Yep, we're going to keep developing him, and we're still happy with him, but we're going to go with Darnold until the hand stops being hot, basically." And now he's insulated from that. He can dip in quality and still play out the rest of the season. Run Game Enjoyer says, is the secret to being the best team in the NFL just to have a kick-ass O-line and what that opens up in the pass game and run game? Many have been saying since probably World War II that the game starts and ends in the trenches, baby. Get Quackin' says, speaking of the trenches, Dallas only got limited snaps on Sunday. Do you think that's more the staff easing him back in after his injury or more that his play is underwhelming? So this is the other one. I got a million of these questions. A lot of people are very worried about Dallas Turner like being a bust because he doesn't have like 49 sacks in his first 4 games. Relax. Okay. Chill out. He's been not as productive as like Pat Jones, right? Pat Jones is having this crazy year. But he has been he's existed, right? He's been around, he's gotten a pressure or two here or there, and he hasn't been playing a lot of snaps now. I think that maybe you could say that it is true that like Jihad Ward and Patrick Jones usurped him, but like, have you seen how those guys are playing? They're playing unbelievable football right now. So like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And a lot of what's going on defense that's working really well is kind of because everybody's a veteran. Everybody knows how to back off into a hook curl. You're not teaching anybody anything new. You're not trying to ride with like rookie waves, and like everybody can be a veteran. So the rookies we can just be patient with them. But I need a modicum of patience. Somebody asked, is it too early to call him a bust? Yes, it's unbelievably too early. It's way too early to call him a bust. You might as well call the presidential election today if you're going to start calling things that prematurely. Okay, people are going to break up with you for being that premature. That is ridiculous to me. Like first year, you can't call anyone a bust. You just can't. You're not allowed to. Nobody gets to be a bust their first year. Look at like Jameson Williams, right? He if anyone was going to be called a bust, the way he showed up after his rookie year, after he was hurt, and then even last year he was a disaster. You totally could have called him a bust. People did. Now he's blown up. Sometimes it takes a second. It's okay for people to take time to adjust to the NFL, even highly drafted ones. And it hasn't even been like bad for Dallas Turner. And don't cite the PFF grade to me. Okay. Do better. It's been fine. He's done his job. He's been out there. He's not out there on third downs. That's why the snap count has gone down, by the way. It's that Jihad Ward and Pat Jones are the other two edges out there on their like third down only edge rusher package. And so Dallas Turner is kind of the one relegated there. But patience. Okay. The time will come. And in watching his tape, nothing is like standing out as like a red flag. Oh no, he's bad at this. At least not to me. I could look at Lewis Seen in the preseason and say, okay, this is wrong, that is wrong, that is wrong. With Dallas Turner, it's fine. It's just Patrick Jones is kind of blown up right now. Let him cook. RG Besky asks, how much of an impact has Josh Oliver been having in the games? I know that he has been catching a few passes here and there, but I don't know if he's doing a good job as a blocker, which is why we brought him in, right? Yeah, that is why they brought him in. I think he's doing great. I think what we're going to find, I haven't looked at it closely enough yet. I haven't gotten through watching all of the tape. I kind of just looked at that like second half of the defense stuff to try to answer that, what happened question. But I think he 1v1'd Rashawn Gary and won a bunch. And like Packers fans are kind of mad about that, but about him getting blocked by a tight end. I think that tight end is Josh Oliver. So I actually think Oliver might have laid down a crazy one on this. That's quite the feat. And he's also been part of some really important double teams on some of these duo reps that I've been talking about a lot on this show. So yeah, very much an impact. I've got a few more questions. I want to make sure that I have time to get to all of them. So we're going to keep rolling coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets, or not last-minute tickets, okay? I don't have the courage to do the last-minute thing, but if you're just like trying to figure out something to do on a Saturday, you want to go say, hey, is there a concert in town? Is there a comedy show around me I can go to or something? You can browse Gametime, and they'll actually curate for you. If you let them curate for you, they can also find the best deals. Say, well, what's going on? What can I do Saturday night? What kind of deal is there? And you can get absolutely ridiculous tickets at the last minute, or you can do what I did and set up all, I've got a couple of Vikings away games that I'm going to be attending this year. I'm going to be at the Rams game, Jags game. And I managed to get those tickets at those really nice stadiums for like less than $300 a pop, which is kind of crazy. And that is with the all-in pricing toggled on. The all-in pricing at check means that you will see listed at all the seats what you will pay at checkout. No surprise hidden feeds, no nonsense, none of that. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Rattling off a few more here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Twitter Tuesday mailbag edition. The next one comes from The Child, who says, what has KOC been doing on offense to start the year without Hockenson? And what are some things that change / improve when he gets back? So not a lot is different like that they're calling. It's just that they're having Josh Oliver do stuff you really would rather have Hockenson do. Like, it's just, they're calling the same plays. It's just the personnel is guys that you just wish were TJ Hockenson. Like, they're going to keep calling some of these duo runs or zone to the strong side, but you get Hockenson in as a blocker instead of like Johnny Munt. You feel pretty good about that. But especially in the pass, they've got Brandon Powell right now running a lot of the routes that TJ Hockenson would usually run. And that's fine. Brandon Powell has been kind of clutch sometimes. He's done a good job as like a fill-in, as a backup. But I'm going to say that, like, yeah, they do less Brandon Powell minutes and more, from 11 or even 12 personnel, if that's what it's going to be, that give you a chance to kind of use that downfield stuff. And like Powell as a catch and run guy, while he's shifty and kind of fast in his routes, he's going to catch the ball. He hasn't like been, juking anybody out of their shoes, right? And TJ Hockenson has done such a great job of maximizing that space. And I think a better job of maximizing that space than you would see from Brandon Powell. But also, Powell's a small guy. And when you're a small guy, Addison suffers from this too. You can get bumped off your route way easier than it would be for somebody like TJ Hockenson, so things can stay in rhythm a little bit more. They're subtle impacts. They don't, it's not the impact that you get from prime Travis Kelce where he's catching 4 million touchdowns, although Hockenson will do plenty of that. It's smaller, more subtle impacts. He was the guy at the point of attack on that run play that we're really crediting to Aaron Jones. He stayed on his rhythm so that his route could break and we could force the coverage to declare what it wanted to declare so that Sam Darnold had time to get to his third read and, hit that one to Jordan Addison, who was the third read. All of that stuff adds up. And right now, like Powell and Sherfield are doing a lot of that stuff. Johnny Munt's doing a lot of that stuff, of course, and those just aren't as good of players. Ben Hurdler asks, is this a legit breakout season for Pat Jones? What are the chances he gets a second contract with Minnesota? I don't know. It's a lot of sacks, but it's not a lot of production outside the sacks. So I think it might be a little Fugazi. I mean, he's a rotational guy. So like Fugazi production's phenomenal for a rotational guy. Good for you. I do think he is playing his way into some more money. I don't think it's Minnesota's. I think with Dallas Turner in the building, Van Ginkel, Grenard, all under contract for several years, I think they'll maybe like kind of have that fourth guy. He'll be a 4th round pick or something like that. You'll sort of Janarius Robinson your way into some depth. But it's really just depth. And I think Pat Jones will go to the market and pursue a job where he is more than just depth. And I think somebody's going to give that to him. So good for him. Sam Silver says, in the post-game press conference, O'Connell alluded to the Packers stacking the box and making it hard to run duo in the second half. When asked about the frequent dropbacks in the second half, he said that they really liked the looks they were being given due to the Packers selling out for the run, figured they could exploit that. Do you buy into this strategy? Yeah, kind of. And also not. So I went back and looked at some of those that I had a big issue with. And what he's pointing out is that there's a lot of single high. That's what he's talking about. That the Packers are expecting run, so they're stacking the box, and that means one high safety. You do one high safety, it's either cover 3, and the Shanahan-McVay offenses feast on cover 3. They've got 4 million cover 3 beaters, and they all go deep to Jefferson for touchdowns. Or it's man coverage. And we have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison that are cooking their secondary. So single high, great news. We want to pass on single high. So I kind of get that. I don't think that it excuses all passes, all of them. No semblance of balance at all. Like mixing a duo once, even against a stacked box, just to keep them honest. And just to get yourself, a 2nd and 7 instead of, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, stopping the clock and all that. Like there's other situational things that even if the pass is a good look, I still kind of hold that critique that instead of saying I would rather you have done a run heavy strategy, okay, they weren't giving you the looks, but still balance it out a little bit. So it helps assuage me some, but not all, I guess is the answer there. Mac says, so Mac had a big long one, but here's the meat of it. You cited win percentages from ESPN's in-game win algorithm as a reason for optimism amidst a messy fourth quarter in Green Bay. Do you know how win percentage is actually calculated? And there's a whole other thing essentially saying, so, I have gone on my PFF rant a lot about how I don't really like PFF grades and I don't trust them. But I think, Mac, I don't think you caught the real point of the PFF thing. It's not necessarily that it's I don't know how the sausage is made, therefore I don't trust it. I actually know enough about how that sausage is made to understand the flaws of it. And if I am going to go with a PFF grade, I kind of know where to look if I'm going to disagree with it. But it's more that it encourages you to not do thinking, right? It gives you an answer. What win probability gives you is not an answer. It gives you context. It gives you the, so they were 10% to win here. Yeah, that probably explains why they got all too high. It gives you that insight. If you don't like the win probability thing, which Mac goes on to say, he's a PhD researcher and he has a bunch of valid problems with win probability, in-game flow, injuries, not addressed by win probability models at all, to my knowledge. And it's proprietary and you don't know how the sausage is made. And there's just not a lot of information out there. So all super valid concerns with win probability. So if you don't like win probability, totally get it. Especially if you're a PhD researcher, you get to be like, this is bad. And so just logic it out though, right? If you don't want the algorithm to tell you that the Vikings weren't really ever in that dire of a situation, the fact that the Packers never had the ball with the chance to take the lead, the situation could only ever be so dire. And really, we were managing the clock for the entire fourth quarter. Was it messy? Were there mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. The coverage problems that I talked about earlier in the show, those need to be cleaned up, and the coaches understand and definitely know that. The players definitely know that. They were very self-critical after the game. So I don't think that there's a long-term concern here. But if the question to do I know how win percentage is actually calculated, which Mac also understands that it's based on history, right? It's okay, teams that have a 2nd and 9 in a 2-minute drill down a score win this percentage of the time, that kind of thing, on a big matrix, on a big giant scale over the course of the history of football. So that's how win percentage is calculated, as to my knowledge. But no, I don't know any of the math or the guts of it, and that's all going to be super proprietary lock and key. You'll never find out about it. Jettis Agent says the Wilfs have said no KOC or KAM extension talks until the end of the season. What more do they need to see? Surprise extensions over the bye week? I don't think so. It's not about what more they need to see. It's just that it's not time to do that right now. Everybody's focusing on the season. Everybody in that building has like a different job to do right now. And that they all have on their calendars probably, hey, let's talk about the extension. They've got the meeting for when they're going to talk about that. And I don't know if you've ever like had to run a business, but people who have to run a business have to keep a pretty detailed calendar, and they can't really afford to get distracted by tasks ahead of time. You got to do what's in front of you. So yeah, they'll do it when they planned to do it. There's no reason to really do it in the season though. They could be sitting there going, yeah, we're definitely going to do this, right? Like, hey, when we talk about this, we're definitely going to be a yes, aren't we? But they're not going to like sit down and take the time to have that meeting before they've put it on their calendar to do that. Unless there's some like matter of urgency, but there isn't one. So why bother? Probably gets done in the summer. That's what I'm guessing that gets done. You'll hear about it like on the eve of like OTAs, that kind of thing. Wham Warnold says, why am I so upset about that interception for Green Bay? We won, but like, come on, that's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It's pretty rough. But why are you so upset? I don't know. That's a good question. The Vikings won. Here's the thing about these. It's a bad call. Bad calls are everywhere. You get bad calls in every single game. No good refs. There's never been a good ref. You'll never see a good ref. There's no good refs. That goes for the replay officials too. All refs are bad includes replay officials. And they don't miss as often, but they miss. That was a miss. Sometimes we'll be on the right end of it. It's a matter of luck. It's just a matter of variance. The real key is to do enough so that you didn't end up needing that to win the game, and they didn't. So congratulations. It's a fact of life. It's like getting mad at the weather. You can't do anything about it, and it's never going to stop. There will always be weather. It's time to just kind of deal with it. Last one I'm going to do comes from Josh, who says, during your Locked On crossover, you didn't seem bought in, but after the game, you were real fired up. Are you finally bought in, or what was the reason you were so hyped? So I announced my buy-in was after the Niners game. I kind of set that line all offseason. I was like, I don't really buy this, but if they go beat the 49ers, that can kind of prove to me that they're real. And then they did that, and I'm like, okay, well, yep, you did it. And it wasn't even really close. You did it. I'm in. Super bought in. I think the reason I was excited about the game. Yeah, absolutely. I will always approach those crossovers in a more humble way. I'm not a trash talker. I don't like to be a trash talker. I don't want to be a trash talker. And so when I'm talking to somebody who's a colleague of mine who covers another team, I'm going to be humble and respectful because I'm a grown up. But after the game, there's also something to kind of letting my emotions flow out, because that's probably similar to the emotions that you're feeling. And that's part of doing a podcast, is trying to capture that energy. So I feel like those things are, the crossover is just for a different purpose than the recap episode. The recap episode is for emotion and instant reaction and all that stuff. Talk Wednesday, and I'll be a lot more nuanced and a lot more balanced. But I also was responding to a narrative. There's a narrative that the Vikings squeaked one out, that they got lucky, blah, blah, blah. And I don't really think that that's true. And so I'm going to fight for that. But understand that I'm going to fight with just as much vigor for a negative thing, if I think so. If I thought it was the other way around, if everybody was saying the Vikings kicked the crap out of the Packers and I thought that it was actually, they got lucky, if that was my opinion, I'm also going to fight for that with just as much energy. Just because it was positive and you agree with it this time doesn't mean that like my psyche has changed. It just means that this is my opinion on this one. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. I will see you all tomorrow for some X's and O's. I don't know what it's going to be. It'll be something probably about sustainability, but I will see you all for that. And as always, Skol.